Of the Sebastian Budget Review Advisory Committee to order. Let's all stand for the pledge, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty, and justice for all. Let's have a roll call, please.
Yeah, Janet's on Skype, so, oh, there she is.
Yeah, she's on here. I can't hear her.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Mr. Napier, when there's a motion made, if you would just repeat so-and-so made the motion, so-and-so seconded the motion, because I can't always see who's talking from here.
Okay, no problem.
Thank you.
Will do.
All right. So Mr. Lewin is excused.
Who?
Mr. Lewin is here.
He's here.
Oh, I'm sorry. See, I can't identify you all. Okay, Mr. Lewin. Mr. Hall.
Here.
Mr. Napier.
Present.
Ms. Serta.
Here.
I
Here.
don't think she got, did you get it then?
Yes, I
Okay.
got it.
Good.
Mr. Wiragoda.
He notified me he would not be attending.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Hoffman.
Present.
And Mr. Hurley, he is on Zoom?
He is on Zoom.
Yeah, he's Zoom, yeah.
Can
Okay,
you unmute
thank you.
Mr. Hurley?
So that one absence is excused then. He called you?
Yes, yes.
Okay, good. Okay, that's it, thank you. Next on the agenda is the approval of the minutes of the meeting of March 16th, 2020. Did everyone get a chance to review those? Okay, I'll entertain a motion for approval. Who made the motion? Amber Serta made the motion.
I
Did you get that?
I got Miss Serta. I don't know who seconded it.
Lewin.
Mr. Lewin.
Thank you.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Minutes carry unanimously. Presentation of the draft budget by Ken Kilgore, Administrative Services Director and CFO, and committee discussion of the draft budget and capital improvements. Ken, you're on.
Thank you. It's been a very difficult year, as you can imagine from reading the news. What I'm going to do tonight is just give you a brief synopsis overview of what's been submitted by staff right now is the current draft of the 2021 budget, and there's still a lot to be settled. We do have it balanced, but as I go through it, you'll see where we've got probably some areas that we're not happy with, and we'll be working on it and continuing to work on it, up through at least the August meeting with the City Council, and then finally in the September public hearings. So, as I said, we're going to focus primarily on the general fund budget and the general fund revenues. I'll touch on the enterprise funds and all the other funds that we budget, but not into a lot of detail, and then I'll sum it up. For general fund, we had no additions to personnel that we've included in the budget request. We did have 2 part-time positions that were deleted. They were basically exchanged with some staff rearrangements. When you look at the grand totals and the breakdown of the general fund budget, personnel cost is actually down by $11,000, and I'll get into more details about how that happened. Operating expenses are down $161,000. This is about 5%, I think, of the, actually 5.6% less than last year's budgeted operating cost. Capital spending went down $125,000 over what it was in the current year, and we had a small amount of transfers from other funds. There is no budgeted transfers out to other funds projected for next year. So a $302,000 decrease in the budget is about a 2.3% decline. Back to the personnel cost, as I said, down $11,000. We provided for no pay increases. We were fortunate enough to get actually a reduction in our health insurance premiums by 3%. We did not increase full-time employees. We decreased by the 2 part-time employees. We had one employee scheduled for retirement, so we have budgeted the payouts of his sick and vacation time. We had reclassifications and adjusting for responsibilities of positions by $51,000, but we had zero funding for holiday bonuses or incentives. We've done the holiday bonuses the last couple of years at around the holiday season, and we've had the incentive program where we could give some kind of small bonus, usually reviewed on a quarterly basis, looking at the employees that had been achieved something significant or had really stepped up during the quarter. Not a lot of money, but as I'm saying, we have no provisions in the current numbers for any kind of program like that.
Ken, can you go back over the health insurance is resolved already?
Yes, we were fortunate enough to meet with the broker. The broker approached our current carrier and basically said, unless you want us to go out shopping, you need to do well on the expected premium that you're going to charge. They first came back and said it would be a, actually they came back, originally it was a 3% increase. We said no, and they came back with 0, and we said, well, can you do any better than that? And they actually came back with a 3% decline. Well, what we're told by the broker, or from the broker, is that they look at the environment, and those businesses that they insure are sometimes not in optimistic standing. So that I think they consider the governmental client as being a good, stable client for them, and that's why they could step up and do better for us.
Thank you.
Ken, can I ask you a question on, I'm not
Yes.
sure, is this working? Can you hear me? Okay. I'm having difficulty with the microphone here, that's why I'm asking. On that previous page, you have 0 provided for pay increases, but then you have $51,000 for added responsibilities. The
Right.
added responsibilities, what form are those taking?
I'm sorry, I couldn't quite hear that.
The added responsibilities, the $51,632, what form is that taking?
You want me to answer?
I mean, we're not having pay increases, but
So we're reclassifying some employees and adding responsibilities onto them. Rather than adding staff, we're going to add some additional responsibilities onto employees. And because we've redone their job description and added those duties and responsibilities, we're going to give them a step up in their pay per the union contracts. And some are non-union as well, but mostly union. If that makes sense.
Okay. So this is the area that troubles me, is the revenue assumptions that we've made in order to balance the budget. Your property taxes are 33% of the total revenues for general fund. Franchise fees are 11%, utility taxes 18%, and state revenues 18%. So sum all that up, 80% of our revenue comes from those sources. With franchise fees and looking at our collections thus far this year, even with the virus and any impacts from that, it appears to me at this point in time, I've got information up through the June payments that they made on their franchise fees and utility taxes, particularly from Florida Power and Light. And I'm thinking we're going to be pretty flat. In other words, we'll have the revenue in 2020, the year we're in now, about the same level as we collected last year. We actually budget, of course, for growth, and we assumed in this year that we would get more than just that flat amount. So that's got some impact on the current year revenue picture. I've made the assumption in the projections I submitted to the city manager that by October and early this next fiscal year, things will be better, that we will have a 4.5% increase over this year's. So in other words, we're going to recover based on our assumptions for the effects of the virus on utility and franchise fees. But we are going to see that 4.5% increase in next year's collections. I did something similar with state revenues. When I look at the half-cent sales tax, they are down 35% when you compare April of this year with April of last year. And if you remember April, actually is collections that we received in June that are based on April activity that was paid to the state in May and then turned over to us in June. So that's why I'm only dealing with April collections. So that, of course, is before the reopening activity began. So I'm hoping that if that holds and we continue to stay open, that we'll have some recovery. And there again, by October, November, we'll start seeing actually some growth in those revenues. A portion of the state revenues is state revenue sharing. That they set once a year. And I'm sure Larry will remember that it's based on their fiscal year, the state's fiscal year. So about August, they usually furnish us the amounts that are going to be for the next 12 months. Well, in this year, they've already notified us and they've already told us that the June and July payments are actually reduced from what they promised us back last August that we would get on a monthly basis. So we took a big hit there. It's a portion of the state revenues. Of course, the largest share is the half-cent sales tax. So there's some of that offsets some of the negatives with the positives. We did crank into the numbers here for revenues that we would get $50,000 recovered through the COVID-19 CARES Act. I don't know if there's anything in the paper or not yet about the counties received a large sum of money that they are going to allocate back to the cities to help us with our expenses.
And we believe that number is going to be significant. We haven't gotten our agreement from the county, but it will more than cover the expenses from salaries and the COVID-19. They did the FMLA COVID-19 where we had to pay 2/3 of their salary. We can use these funds to reimburse the city for those costs and several other costs that we've had to incur for some software, Zoom, hand sanitizers, all of that. So that's in the works right now. So we should be square on that, and hopefully we'll be able to have some to carry us through as this pandemic moves forward.
Just a comment here. Before I came, I'm watching the news out of West Palm. Did you see it? Yeah, I turned it on, yeah. It's on. The couple of cities in Palm Beach County have already complained and filed letters of protest that the county of Palm Beach County is sitting on their money and not distributing it out to the cities.
So the governor's declaration was that the county, and I don't have the exact wordage, but it was anticipated the county would share funds with the cities. And Indian River County is doing that. I can't speak for Palm Beach County, but I did see that news report this evening as well.
Interesting. So we think we'll be okay with...
We'll be okay with the funds. So what's ironic is the state gave the large counties over 500,000 100% of their money when they got it. The state now has given us, the smaller counties, 25% of the money. And we're going to have to spend that and then file a report, and then they're going to review, the same people that review our FEMA reports will review our COVID reports, and if we did good and we were good stewards, then they'll release the other 2/3. But remember, we have to have spent the 1/3, and they have to approve it. So in 2 years, maybe we'll have it figured out. I'm just digressing now, but you know where I'm going.
Yeah, I know where you're going. You still think, Ken, we're going to get 4.5% more in state revenues?
As I try to emphasize, these are very optimistic.
Yeah,
I mean, who knows what's going to happen?
Basically, what you're saying is that the virus will not impact the next winter's snowbird traffic through here.
Come
And
October,
that
or at
all
least
the
by
bars and
November.
restaurants will be wide open again.
Now, my
Yeah,
brush.
your guess is as good as mine. I won't tell you you're wrong, but I won't tell you you're right.
Well, I have a rationale behind this because, you know, if I really base these estimates on where it looks like in the last couple of months, we would be taking like drastic measures, you know, a modest property tax increase wouldn't cut it. We would be actually severely cutting the budget as far as personnel and taking furlough days or, you know, extreme measures. And what I'm saying is that we can set the budget, albeit optimistic, and if by the time we go to either approve the budget in September, the final approval, if we see things are just not turning around, no sign that they're going to turn around, then we consider what we have to consider. But, you know, why take those drastic measures and then come into early next year and things are better, there are vaccines on the way, or...
And if I may, in August, we'll have a better idea of what the state's prediction of revenue share will be. Too preliminary now. And Ken and I talked, and we, even before they came out with the numbers, we agreed it was going to be about a 30% deficit in those two, and it turned out to be somewhere in that neighborhood. And we did move some capital projects that were funded by DST funds and push those out a year, not spending any of that money because we don't know how much we're going to get. We offset some projects where we felt there may have been some excessive DST money funneled into that so that we could cover some other more important projects and those. So we've moved projects around to try to forward think this money. So if it is worse, we can keep them out. If it's better, we can bring some of those projects back. But we had to think about it in this, what information we have today. So there's some projects that we decided that we would go ahead and move those funds another year out. And we've moved some equipment purchases out that were going to be scheduled for today, for this upcoming year. But you can only push them so far to where you build this pile of funds that you're going to have to come up with. So the ones that we felt relatively sure that we could push out another year, we did that to try to get this budget in line. So this is going to be a tough year. It's been this way every year since I got here. I'm hoping one year we'll have a nice smooth year, but we're working on it.
So basically, we're only down in sales tax and sales tax related items where they shut the economy down.
Correct.
Everything else seems to be coming in normal. I'm sure gas tax was down too because people didn't travel.
Yes, there's some decline there.
So you think 30% overall is going to be the total amount of revenue loss? Is that for the entire fiscal year?
It's a couple cost items, not out of a general fund. So DST's one fund, it's separate.
Right.
It's almost, it has
Right.
specifics you can
But
do.
that's sales tax, so.
Yeah, so in the revenue share, that's going to be a big hit. But we
Yes.
also had, our property values. We haven't gotten our final numbers yet. We predicted 6.5 and it's 7.5, and we're having a little bit of concerns over how those figures were. Once we get the new numbers, we're going to go back to the property appraiser and talk about it, because we had a huge, significant number in new construction that came online that needs to be considered. So we're going to think about all that. We're looking at all of those things. Sorry, Kim.
Can you hear me now?
That's better, yes.
Sound like a commercial. Can you hear me now? Sorry about the delay. I just had a question on the property tax. Yes, I know we've had a lot of increased construction in the city and all, but anybody have any rough idea what impact this pandemic's going to have on collections for next year? I mean, how many people are going to be delinquent? How many are going to be delaying not paying in November but waiting to the very last, maybe March or something, to pay? All of that could have a huge impact on our total revenue.
Yes, I did edge up the amount of delinquents we'll be expecting next year. Slight increase, but it's still unknown. There again, I'm optimistic, and hopefully things start looking better. And when the appraiser makes his assessments in December, or he finalizes those numbers for the tax roll, who's to say? I just can't imagine how he's going to.
I'm a little concerned that even if we came in with a flat budget, that we might still be very short.
Ken, if I may. So you might have a shortage in the cash flow, which we can compensate for. We may not get all of the money up early for the discounts, but we'll eventually get it. Remember, those that don't pay it, there's opportunistic people out there who will buy the tax certificate to get the interest money off of that. And that happens quite frequently. When someone doesn't pay, then the tax certificates are sold and up to 18% interest, which is a good investment on any investment. But that is something that could possibly make up for the difference in the people who are delinquent. There could be tax certificate sales, and the city would get their money. It would just be a cash flow issue.
So we fall back on the fund balance to carry us through until we can recoup those funds. Okay. That's all I have.
Actually, I did do some research, and if you look back over the last 10 years anyway, we budget 96% of the tax roll is the amount that we'll actually receive each year, and it's been slightly above 96. I was hoping to look at some kind of trend that says, we always get 97%, and I could assume we get more, but the 96 is a perfect level for us, I think, based on our historic, even times during the recession of what we totally collected each year of the tax roll.
Ken, not to sound pessimistic, but the revenue seems to be the most difficult part of the budgeting process this year. The sales tax, the half-cent sales tax, as I see, the businesses have declined, and we're anticipating it increasing, as you suggested, in the winter months. it seems to be that the pandemic is getting worse right now, from what I'm reading in New York State, in certain states, Florida being one of them. And I know I just spoke to a friend of mine who said he's not coming down next year, the way it looks right now. When do we adjust the 4.5% overall increase if we do adjust it, or is that what we're going to leave in the budget right now?
I think between now and September, we hopefully have a little bit better information or can get a firmer conclusion. I mean, because it's a shot in the dark right now. I mean, everybody, as you talked about the virus and how there was going to be a V recovery as opposed to a reoccurring. I mean, a lot of smarter people than us, I think, are looking at it and still not giving us any kind of firm direction.
But back to the DST funds, a half-cent sales tax, we've already projected moving projects out that we're going to be covered by that next year's DST. We can postpone projects if we need to, which doesn't affect the general fund revenues or the general fund expenditures. They're designated funds that can only go to certain projects. So if we have to, we can just postpone those projects if we don't get those DST funds. Discretionary sales tax is a different problem altogether, but as you mentioned, people aren't coming back down. There's a tremendous amount of people didn't go home. So we have been showing record sales at the golf course, record sales. We have so many people that have stayed that didn't go home. So that's the other part of it as well. Whether that holds true, I don't know. But right now, that seems to be the trend.
So I am going to go a little further into some of or just touch on the other funds. I got like one slide on each fund, but the golf course, as Paul just mentioned, we've got a good optimistic, but perhaps it'll get there as far as more revenue to the golf course. Of course, we got the restaurant lease that's continuing at the negotiated rate. We're paying the airport for the rent owed to it for the use of the property. Golf course will be paying off on the $700,000 building fund loan that was made several years ago. The amortized principal and interest on that loan, as well as paying $35,000 towards the loans that are owed to the general fund back in those years when they were basically spending more than they were taking in. Over the long term, we look at this every year and say, okay, it's going to look better down the road, and the numbers are structured that way. I guess the key with the golf course is there is a limitation on how many players, and even the higher numbers, if they come true, will they ever get a lot better? Who knows?
Ken, hang on. Golf course. Yeah, my favorite subject.
I knew that.
By the way, a favorable comment. I've heard from several people that the golf course is in excellent shape and is a very nice play. But a question on the airport rent. A couple of years ago, didn't we lower that down to like $90,000 or something? Wasn't the rent adjusted in the budget down to almost $90,000? I thought we did that because the golf course was hurting.
We talked about it when I first came on board, but I chose not to lower it because we were starting to show some revenue generation, and we did not want to get sideways with FAA because they had lowered it like 5 times.
Yeah, I know.
And I was
I think when it initially started, it was up closer to 150.
No, it was like 200
I think it was even like 375 or something.
Oh, is that right? It was that high years ago.
By this time.
Okay.
But I was concerned, because if we start lowering it, because it's supposed to be fair and reasonable rates.
Right.
If we get too far down, FAA may come to us and say, hey, wait a minute. So
Okay.
we left it at 106, but it was discussed. It absolutely was discussed.
Thank you.
And speaking of the airport, things are pretty favorable there with the amount of increased property rents that they've been generating over the last couple of years. There again, I mean, all these funds that have people in them, I mean, they're just like in general fund. There are no pay raises budgeted or any kind of provisions for different pay. So they are paying off the loans that were made years ago to from the DST fund. That was for the Hangar A and Hangar B. As Paul mentioned, you know, there was some juggling of the projects that were scheduled to either defer them or it when possible. You know, we do a balancing act between all the funds that can, you know, that are designed for capital improvements or infrastructure improvements. So I'll touch on those in a moment. Building fund, absolutely no problem there. They've got ample reserves. Their revenue base is more than sufficient for the amount of operating costs that we're projecting. Now I'm going to talk briefly about the special revenue funds, the gas tax fund. We are down 31% if you look at month over month between March of this year and March of last year. We were, even with the shuffling around that we were able to do, we budgeted $400,000 for road resurfacing. We've got additional funds for major road reconstruction. In the next fund I'll show you is DST. So we are catching up with the road projects, assuming that the level of revenues do hold steady for us, or at least improve by next year. The DST fund are actually down 37% compared to last year for the month of April. There again, you've got some business reopenings that have come along since the month of April, so if that holds, we won't be perhaps that bad off on a year-over-year basis. We do have some major projects that we hope to be able to do there with the $500,000 of road reconstruction work. Our Riverfront CRA, our Community Redevelopment District, from what the property appraiser has certified to us at this point in time, those areas actually increased 4% in their taxable value this last year. So that's a positive sign for the growth in the CRA, because that's the underlying purpose, is to add to the values in that area. One significant thing, we were paying for the cost of the landscaping contract in the CRA area. We've been paying 100% of that out of CRA funds. This year we reconsidered that and said, well, a lot of that landscaping cost is in the swale areas or the drainage system. So we moved half of that cost over now to the stormwater fund. But we still are continuing with half the contract paid for out of the CRA. Recreation Impact Fee Fund. They are getting tighter. We used to be concerned year to year that we weren't spending the money fast enough. We're supposed to spend it within 7 years. But there's absolutely no question that our Leisure Services Director and the Parks and Rec Committee have really come forward with a lot of projects over the last couple of years, and we do have it balanced out for those things that they're requested. We have had this reviewed by the Parks and Recreation Board, and they seem happy with the projected expenditures that we plan on proceeding with. Stormwater Utility Fund, we do have all the fees covering the personnel and operating cost, and some equipment replacements. We've got, like I mentioned, the half of the landscaping contract in the CRA area. And we've got $100,000 allocated for roadway swale and culvert work as they proceed with doing the street resurfacing and repaving and reconstruction. And significant this year is a $200,000 that's been allocated to update the stormwater master plan. A couple of the smaller funds are the law enforcement forfeiture funds. Those are required by the state to only be used when there's not a budget made for certain police equipment perhaps that they need. This gives us a source of monies, but each individual purchase is brought to the city council for individual approval. But we don't estimate or project any items to be paid out of those monies in the next year budget. We have accumulated, or expect to have by the end of this year, $57,000 in the parking in lieu of fund. We've got one agreement that was just started this last year, so we'll collect $3,000 more next year. So for those funds are designed for actual parking improvements in the CRA area. Cemetery Trust Fund, it was really my proposal that the half of the sales that are, according to the ordinance, available to help fund the operating cost of the cemetery. So based on that, we were transferring in this year $85,000 to the general fund to offset the cemetery division's operating and maintenance cost. So I am, I'm sorry, we
Ken, just clarification, that transfer is nothing more than the fund can't pay any monies out directly, doesn't have a checking account or anything, so
we generally
you would
don't
transfer to the general fund just for operational purposes,
And
right?
technically, as a trust fund, we exclude that from being a required budgeted fund.
Right.
So rather than actually creating a budget like we would with a stormwater fund or DST fund, we do just transfer it as a matter of convenience and capture all the cemetery cost in the cemetery division of general fund. So we are increasing, actually in the current year it's $80,000 we're transferring, and we're recommending $85,000 be transferred next year and $90,000 the following year. One fund we have is the debt service fund, which is there again just a transfer between funds where the DST funds are actually paying the stormwater utility debt on a bank note that we still have outstanding, but it's soon to be reaching final maturity in May of 2022. So that will free up a little bit of the DST funds. Just a quick summary of the capital improvement program. We are up over what we had budgeted last year. We had $23 million in total over the 6-year period. This coming year, we're looking for $27.6 million to be paid out, or at least appropriated. Some of the largest items include the $900,000 street repaving, because there again, that's the $400 that will be funded from local option gas taxes, and the $500 from the DST. Stormwater master plan I mentioned is funded out of the stormwater fund. The $500,000 is funded out of the stormwater fund. The new taxiway at the airport is out of DST. It would be both grant money and the amount of the matching. And the grant money and the amount of matching for the sewer services to be on the west side of the airport is currently at a $1 million total. Yes.
I think that should actually be $1,293,000, because we got the $293,000 from St. John's for the Westport Airport.
Yeah, I don't think our document yet reflects that, but
okay. We may have gotten it
we do
before.
need to update that. You're
Yes, sir.
correct.
Question. So if we get to November and things are not looking as positive as we think they may, is there, how do I want to say? The question is there a formal process for deciding which of these projects gets put back, pushed back? Or how is the process made? Does that have to go to city council, or where does that go for the decisions?
I'm sure with our quarterly reporting, we would come to the city council to give them an update on, and actually amend the budget if it
And have a
really looked that
discussion on
bad.
which projects are going to be, I mean, that wouldn't come through us. We don't need to make any recommendation on that,
You
right?
might. So what may happen, if I may, is we may, the ultimate recommendation comes, I make the budget, so the ultimate recommendation comes through me, obviously with consultation with staff and Ken, it's all inclusive. And so we would decide on that, and then we would make recommendations, and maybe ask you all to support the recommendations, and then we do the budget amendment with city council, because they're the ones that make the final budget amendment. Not spending money is not an issue, but when you want to start moving things around, that needs to be done through the city council.
Thank you.
So just to touch on property values in the millage, the calculation, one thing different this year than in previous years, usually by this time we are saying to you that we don't know what the certified millage will be. Well, we do have the certified values from the property appraiser, and based on that, our rollback rate will be 2.8090. So we've constructed the budget to be a 2.9399 millage, which is the same millage as this year. We're going to have to advertise that because of the Save Our Homes rollback legislation as a 4.66 tax increase, because we would be increasing the millage, even though the proceeds would be increased for the additions to the tax roll. And that's where what Paul mentioned is the additions, according to the property appraiser, that were certified were $33 million. When you look at building permits and what we believe we got certificates of occupancy on, we are a little bit higher than that. So we perhaps will be questioning that. And it's doubtful now that I've never seen a property appraiser back off on their property, on their certified tax.
He doesn't put the
amount.
same value on him. You all put it on there for building value for your permits, so I can guarantee you that. No property appraiser does. They always have less of a number than what we charge
Than what
the
we
permit
did for the
fees on.
permitting.
But it's never been this far separated. The delta hasn't, I don't think it's been this far separated.
Is the gap pretty wide?
I think it's pretty wide. What do you think, Ken?
Well,
I mean, I don't want to give the number out because it's obviously going to be a negotiating tactic, but we feel that our numbers based on our permit value. So when someone builds a home, they give us what they consider the value. Well, you could look at it two ways. Do they undervalue it so they pay less for the permit, or do they're not going to overvalue it? So these are some of the conversations I'll have with them once we get some final numbers, so we can have a conversation. He may not change it, but I think if we can bring a case to them that we think it's a little bit.
I don't know. I was successful in getting them changes a couple of years in Fellsmere, where they missed a few things and didn't have everything on there that they should have had. And I always looked at the new additions when we had a new, especially commercial project, because it's 100% taxable. I always looked at those.
Right, and so we'll sit down with them and have a conversation. I think it's worthwhile to have that conversation.
I agree. I think that's a very good idea, and that's something that should be watched every year. I even used to do spot checks on single-family residences when we'd have a new house go in.
Yeah,
I always like to see what we valued it at for the permit compared to what they put it on the tax roll as.
And that's what we're going to do, and we're going to sit down with them and talk about it. I think-
That's a very good use of time for that.
Thank you.
I'm going to skip to the next slide just for a second. I'll come back to the last comment on this one. But we did have a good year in terms of additions to the tax roll. The 2020 values, which is what our 2021 budget is based on, with 33 million. And you can see that's the only other year higher than that was 2017, when we were almost 36 million. But I mean, what we're saying, on this same line of thought is that our permitting reflects those kind of better increases. So, but going back to the previous slide, just the last point I wanted to make, that last year's millage of so this year we levied the 2.9399. The year before that we had levied 3.1514. But if we, at the end of the day, say that we wanted the 3.1514 millage, it would be a much higher percentage increase advertised, but it would generate additional funds that could perhaps either give us more cushion or be able to do something for the employees. That's based on our numbers as we know them at this point. I provide this chart just to give some idea about the differences between the 3.1514 millage and the 2.9399 millage. You can see that there'd be some, depending on the value of the property and the effect of homesteaded properties versus all the other properties in town. The homestead can only increase the 1.03%, whereas the commercial properties are maxed out at a 10% increase. But even assuming those maximum increases, you can see the differences in the millage and how much it is on an annual tax bill. I could have been clever, I guess, and shown that as a monthly increase in cost, but that is the actual differences that they would actually see on their tax bill for the year. Just particularly for new members, to give a history of what we've done with ad valorem taxes. The two measures that I compared to, one was the differences from the rollback rate, and the other the differences between the proposed millage and what we finally adopted. This question has come up in the past about when the city council goes to set the proposed millage. We always, from staff's point of view, encourage them to be on the high side, even if they have the best intentions of lowering that before the final hearings. We haven't had a history of setting the higher millage as a proposed millage and ending up with that same proposed millage. Generally, it does come back, regretfully now in hindsight, it's come back even to the same as the rollback rate, or even in some years less. But particularly in the last 2 years, we rolled back to the rollback rate. In hindsight, perhaps we'd be better off if we hadn't, but there again, that's hindsight. So the big unknowns right now at this point is the agreements with the labor, on the labor negotiations, or the progress we make on that. We haven't started any discussions at this point. We, of course, are in the hurricane season. We have the issue of legal settlements that may be out there that would impact our fund balance. We don't know where the virus is going for sure, and we may need to adjust our revenue estimates. As I informed you before, that hopefully by October 2020 we'll start seeing some better revenue estimates. If not, we perhaps will need to adjust in some fashion and take another look at the budget. So I did focus a lot on revenues today or tonight, but also be aware, you know, we looked at the expenditure accounts, we've met with the departments. Paul, I think at this point kind of thinks we've set those budgets at reasonable levels. I've got nothing to add really, so I will close up and take any other additional questions you might have.
Any questions again on his presentation before we move on to the next item? Anyone have any specific questions? Yeah. Amber? Okay. Next on the agenda is agreement on.
Can you hear me? This is Ed Hurley. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Ken, can you hear me?
Is that
Yes.
you, Ed?
Yes. Hello.
Hey, we got you.
Yes, we can hear.
Okay. I just like a couple of things. I'm usually the big optimist, but I'm pessimistic. You know, in the last 6 days, Florida's had 27,000 virus cases. We're the highest in the nation. Our dear governor has got to wake up and do something at some point in the near future. And it would not be a big surprise that we'll go back to a partial or a lockdown. And Florida's had little testing and very little contact tracing. That makes me pessimistic about revenue. I hear you, Ken. You're very optimistic, I think. I think my personal view of this is, and we've always done this, that we go in with last year's millage rate and the council can bring it down, which would be 3.15, et cetera, gets us another 300,000. But I'd like the committee to consider, I underline the word consider, could this be worse? A couple of you have brought this up and you've edged towards it. Do we need to raise that 3.15 to a higher number and give the council the flexibility of having to go to that? We'll know another couple of months' revenue. We'll have an idea where this virus is going, maybe. We would think that the governor would do something in the next 30 to 45 days, which would affect the revenue, no doubt. So what I'm saying is 3.15 is a great start point, but I just lay this out for the committee to consider. Should we give the council a flexibility and go to a higher number? That's me. I'm done at the moment.
Mr. Chairman?
Is that it, Ed?
Yep, that's it for the moment.
Ed, were you on when we did the minutes? I didn't hear you vote on the minutes. Did he vote on the approval of the minutes?
Yes, I did, but I don't know whether you heard me. I've been here since
Did you hear it?
5 minutes of
Okay,
6.
we got you. That's just, that was a note I had. I wanted to make sure.
Mr.
Okay.
Chairman.
Is that it, Ed?
Yep,
Mr.
I'm
Chairman,
ready
for the
for the moment.
record, Mr. Chairman, for the record, could you ask him to voice his vote on the minutes? Because if we didn't hear it, then
Yeah, could you voice your vote on
taker probably
approval of the
doesn't have
minutes?
it.
The answer is yes.
Yes, thank you.
If I could just clarify too, Ed, the current year rate is the 2.9399. The 3.1514 was the rate that we had last fiscal year.
Right.
So I hope I didn't confuse you with that one slide that's
Did
showing.
you get that, Ed?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
What I'm looking at is, on your presentation, on page 19, you said last year's millage of 3.15 would increase revenue by 300,000 over 2.93.
Yeah, but that is last year being 2019, not
Yeah. The
2000.
year before.
1819.
I could have been clearer on the way I presented that, I guess.
So what I was saying is that at the minimum, I think we ought to propose to the city council a top number of 3.15. They can always go lower, but at least it gives them the flexibility and not having to go through that horrible process of sending out letters to everybody. We've always done that, given them the flexibility, and they've generally gone down. But on the other side, should we consider going higher and be somewhat pessimistic? Again, if you set a higher number, let's say, and I just picked a number out of the air, if you raise another 300,000, raise 100,000, name a number. It gives them the flexibility of, if we have problems, they can work within that in the next couple of months before they set the final rate.
Well, this budget, Ed, is balanced at the 2.9399 rate, which is the current rate we have this year. It's the same rate, which is an increase over rollback for this year.
I totally
Right.
understand that. I'm saying I'm pessimistic about the revenues.
Right. Well, we understand that, but they're just going to have to, they'll just have to watch the revenues month to month and adjust expenditures accordingly.
Yeah, Ed, I'm going to, as much as I often agree with you, I'm going to have to disagree with you on this one. I think we're good at the 2.9399. And my point is, I could be pessimistic too, but no one has any idea or any experience in how this thing's going to play out. And I would rather let our managers sitting before us manage the budget by, at least for the initial part of next year, reducing capital expenditures or controlling cost expenditures before we go trying to get carried away with a doomsday increasing the millage rate. Well, that's my opinion. I think we're good to go right here. And I think we have to play this out. We don't know. By November, we could have this miracle vaccine thing, which makes everybody happy. So, yeah.
Anybody else want to?
Yeah, may I, Larry?
Gil, you want to comment?
Yeah, I share the pessimism about what's happening in the state right now, where we may have a lockdown of God knows what's going to be in the next couple of months as things hopefully get better, but maybe get worse. But I don't think the millage is what we should fool with. I think that we should not increase it, but we shouldn't decrease it. So if we're using the same as last year, I think that would probably be the best approach, and look toward.
Well, this budget is funded on that number.
I'm sorry?
This budget is funded on that number.
2.9, right,
Yes.
that's what I would leave it at, and hopefully not reduce it, and the council doesn't reduce it, and hopefully if we need it, there are the avenues that we suggested that we could reduce the costs by. So I'm inclined to leave the 2.9 and not increase it.
Thank you, Gil. Ken, you got a comment?
Well, I'm going to feel pressure to take a position tonight.
Right.
The council will be considering proposed. I'm sorry. So no pressure tonight. The council is going to consider the proposed millage is scheduled on July 22nd. We are scheduled for another budget committee meeting on July 13th.
Right.
And I understand, and you guys just got all this material last
Right.
week, so it's, I
So
didn't
right
want to
now,
put
we can
pressure
just
on
wait
you.
and see.
but I appreciate the comments made. There's one thing that we didn't really put out on the table that city manager just prompted me on. We do, unlike other cities, we've been diligent on keeping a high reserve amount. So roughly the $5 million level.
Yeah.
Now, we've been very persistent in always constructing the budget to maintain that, because once you use it, it becomes more difficult to make it up. But that is a safety valve for us. So if during the year things start going south, through our quarterly reporting and so forth, we'd be, telling the city council and the budget committee about the situation and how we're reacting to it. So it's not as a concrete situation as you might fear.
Good point. Harry, you want to say something?
Always. Always. I just had a few questions. One, this budget's predicated on a millage of 2.9399.
Yes, sir.
Same as this year.
Which is a tax increase of 4.66%.
Correct, over the rollback rate.
So in this budget, are there anything that's being pushed out that we need to catch up on in coming years? And if that's not the case, then how much pressure would we be putting on the city if we went to rollback rate?
I can start off here, but as far as the capital items we budgeted are about $213,000, I think, altogether in general fund, and
Okay.
very limited on what we're doing. Somewhat less than we had budgeted last year. Now, when we went through the recession times, there were a lot of deferrals. I think over the last few years, we've done some improvement as far as the overall condition of the fleet and the maintenance of buildings and air conditioners and so forth. But there's still a lot of well, there again, we allocate the R&R fund to handle unexpected replacements or repairs. So we have that at our disposal as well. So my initial off-the-cuff feeling is that no, we're not cutting it so deeply that we're going to be paying a severe price as far as this year's budget goes. But then, what happened like during the recession, it was year after year. So if we don't bounce back like we're hoping for.
So if we go back to a rollback rate, we might have to push some vehicles or whatever out another year, or?
There's not that much to be pushed as far as capital items.
Mm-hmm.
I think we'd be probably looking at cutting back on
So if I may, you'll start cutting into services and the ability to provide services. When you go to rollback rate year after year, which is admirable, costs for goods and services aren't going down, they're going up. So we have to start cutting maintenance supplies, maintenance equipment,
Okay.
replacement equipment. So we'll start getting to a point where we'll be, quality and the ability to serve will go down, has the ability to go down, because we've trimmed their budget this year more than additionally to what we trimmed it last year. So, for instance, certain things that the ballparks needed to maintain the ballparks were pushed off, partially because of the moratorium, but other equipment and stuff, we ended up having to replace under R&R because we couldn't get it in this budget. So you will start affecting quality of service, I think, at some point if we keep lowering this millage rate. That's my fear. There's
Well,
just
that's
not
if
enough
your
capital
values stay
improvement.
stagnant. If your valuations are increasing 7 to 10% a year, then rollback gives you more money each year.
Correct. No, rollback gives us exactly what we had
The
last year.
same amount of money, yeah. but I mean, it's not decreasing. So rollback doesn't decrease the amount of money you get when your values are increasing.
We end up with the same check at the end of the year. The problem that we end up with is the equipment costs, of course, with everything that's gone on with the tariffs and that, the equipment costs and things have gone through the roof. But we pushed front-end loaders, expensive pieces of equipment out to try to cover these,
Right.
to balance this budget. Those have already been done. Those major
Right.
push-outs have already been done.
Well, I don't normally ascribe to a rollback rate too many years in a row. I mean, you got to account for growth and also, as far as the board here, I am leaning towards the 2.9399 millage rate
And that's what's in there.
for now, until we see what is brought back to us.
We know more in July. You get the actual final numbers around the first part of July, right? Oh, you've got the actual numbers now. They put them out early this year. Ah,
And so Ken and I will be sitting down and going over that, and then I'll try to arrange a meeting with Mr. Davis and see if we can just have a conversation, because I think it's important to
Okay.
bring to him what we see, have him explain how he got his numbers. I'm not saying they're right or wrong. I'd like clarification. I'm not saying he's devalued anything. I'm just saying our numbers don't match.
never hurts to check them.
A no is always a no until you ask.
I strongly recommend it. Okay, Amber, you got any discussion about the millage rate?
I completely understand where Mr. Hill he's coming from, and I too am pessimistic about everything, and I think it's always safe to err on the side of caution, but I agree this isn't where the changes need to be made, so
Well, we got a couple of good pairs of eyes down there that'll watch it.
absolutely, they're doing a great job, so.
Okay, I guess we're ready to move on to the next agreement on the next meeting date. And it's scheduled, it's already on the schedule for July 13, right?
July 13th, yes, sir.
Anybody have any issues with that? And I assume we'll do it the same way as
Yes.
we did this one.
The governor extended the meeting procedures through August 1st.
Right.
And if it continues, he may extend it again. But right now, these meeting procedures are August 1st, through August 1st.
And I'll probably, pretty much refresh you and update you on any changes over what I've spoken about tonight. That's all I can say, really. That it's not going to be a lot of new information. Probably it's mostly an update
Next week. And then the meeting after that, we got one scheduled for the 20th too, right? The following
We
Monday?
did. I had that scheduled or reserved just in case. If the committee, feels like you still need more information.
Well, we can decide that on the 13th when we go, just how far we get through the tentative budget.
Yes, and I'm certainly glad.
Well, Ken, when would you do the quarter ending June 30th report?
Yeah, that's what's going to be my
I wanted to
question, too.
mention that. The committee missed out on being presented the second quarter information, which was the end of March,
Right.
which is old news and probably just be more confusing to present to the public right now. So the June up to the third quarter is due to be presented.
You'd probably have that after because the meeting on the 13th and the 20th, you probably wouldn't have it done by the 20th anyway, would you?
Yeah, we had it on the budget schedule for August 13th.
Right.
Okay.
We may be able to do it before then, but depending on other pressures. But I doubt that it would be ready by the 13th of July. So August 3rd would probably be the answer.
Oh, August 13th's fine. I mean, I've just...
Anything else, Harry? Is that it? Okay, so I guess we're good on the meeting on the 13th. General discussion by members. I'll start down at the other end. Amber? Anything you want to say that you haven't said before?
I don't think so. Thank you.
Okay. Harry?
No, I talked enough tonight.
Okay. Gil?
Yeah, I'd just like to thank Ken for all his help and the preparation. A remarkable job. Well done.
Thank you.
Mr. Bruce?
Yes, two things. Ken, did we ever send the excess FEMA money back, or is it still in our bank account?
I don't send it back until I get some more from them.
Well,
so-
you're okay. You're telling me what I want to hear. It's still in our
Possession is
bank account.
9/10 of the law, Bruce.
Cool. They never came and asked for it.
I
huh?
did have a slight indication that something may happen on the Hurricane Matthew monies, just because they've shifted that now to P. Marwick, an accounting firm, and they've asked questions about the work on the piers. And a part of that money that is still due from Matthew related to the pier. So they've opened up the door for me to raise my hand again and protest that, we sit all this time without any decisions about it. So
Yeah.
I'll give it a shot to keep that possibility of getting all that money back. Would definitely know I've still got it in an account set aside, not to be spent, but waiting on more development there.
It's fine. Thank you.
Okay, and I have no additional comments. What? What? Ed, you got anything to say?
No, I'm all set.
Okay. Comments by staff? You got anything else you want to say? Paul, Ken?
I would just encourage the committee, if after tonight's meeting, something hits you tomorrow that you wish you would have asked, I'm glad to take emails or phone calls or, kind of limiting on visits right now, but any way I can help you or clarify things, I'm happy to do that.
I've got one question, Ken. I've got all the draft here and everything, and if there are any changes, could I just have whatever's easier? If it's easier, just a short list of changes, so we don't have to have a whole complete printout.
I will be doing that. If things change between now and the next meeting, it'll be in the packets to.
Whatever's easiest would be easiest for you.
Yeah, he
you know?
just gives us the page that changes,
Yeah,
and we put it in a book.
that'd be a lot easier if it's easier for you. Right? Whichever.
Yeah, the easiest way is to give you a list of what the changes were and what impact they might have had.
Great.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay, and seeing no one from the public, I don't really have any reason for public comments. Anyone have anything else for the good of the order? This meeting is adjourned.